Hey guys, what's up? It is week 477. Let's jump right into the reviews. And we're going to start off with a big hefty box set here. This is from Severn Films. This is Sangster directs Hammer. Of course, that's Jimmy Sangster, mostly known for being a Hammer writer. Wrote some other things as well. Pretty prolific writer. Had several kind of different phases in his career. But he ended up directing 3 Hammer pictures. Now, I know when people think Hammer, they think Terrence Fisher. They think, Roy Ward Baker. But Jimmy Sangster had a few as well, as he did with writing them. So this set is 3 films here. We got Horror Frankenstein, Lust for a Vampire, and Fear in the Night, also with the deluxe booklet and a bonus disc. All movies are on 4K and Blu-ray. The bonus disc is features and a documentary about Jimmy Sangster. So let's start off right with the first one here. And this is, with the deluxe slipcovers and everything, The Horror of Frankenstein, 1970. This is an odd picture altogether. There's tons of special features that go into it. It has Ralph Bates on the back here, one of Jimmy Sangster's dearest friends who started all 3 of the films he directed, as well as a couple other Hammer pictures, Taste the Blood of Dracula, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, 2 great ones. So Horror of Frankenstein, here we go. Now, The Horror of Frankenstein, I first saw this when me and Jeremy did the run through Hammer, where I pretty much watched all Hammer's horror films. And, that was a lot of first-time watches for me. And I'd seen the Dracula films, I'd seen the first Frankenstein, Curse of Frankenstein. So when I went through these Hammer pictures, and when you watch a lot of these films back to back, it can be a little bit tedious, and it can ruin some experiences. So by the time I got to the 6th Frankenstein, the Frankenstein series, the original, was written by Jimmy Sangster in 56, 57, released 57, and was a huge hit. It was color, it was shocking, it was based on, of course, the same source material the Universal pictures are based on. Had Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein and Christopher Lee as the monster. And it just kind of, resonated with audience. It was the first true real Hammer horror picture, besides the earlier sci-fi Quatermass films and everything like that, most of which were in black and white. So, and maybe all of them. So this one here did really well, and they continued the series on through the 60s and eventually into the 70s. And the 6th one here was actually going to be directed, written, and produced by Jimmy Sangster. He had pretty much total freedom here, and he cast Ralph Bates in here. And I think that they put Ralph Bates on him, and they became good friends. But it's a little odd, right? Because you're following Dr. Frankenstein, loose sequels, not necessarily the same things. They're not direct sequels like the first 2. But so we're used to this kind of dark character of Dr. Frankenstein being the villain of these movies, being is very witty. But we have Ralph Bates in here, and they offered it to Jimmy Sangster at first and asked if he wanted to rewrite it, and he essentially realized it was his original script from Curse of Frankenstein, basically, and he didn't understand what they were doing. He said, "Listen, I'll do it if you let me direct." So this is how he got started here, and he realized that he couldn't recreate the magic of the first film with the kind of thrilling gore at the time and being in color. He couldn't recreate that, so he kind of basically made it almost like a somewhat silly, kind of slightly, very self-aware. I wouldn't say slightly, but slightly goofy, self-aware kind of movie here with Ralph Bates redoing kind of the Curse of Frankenstein. Ralph Bates is pretty solid in this. He's pretty strong. John Finch is also in this film. An early role, John Finch would go on to be in Frenzy and stuff like that. Great actor. We have also some familiar, Veronica Carlson? Is it her? She's a bunch of Hammer movies. Very, very renowned Hammer star here. So there's a bunch of Hammer regulars here. And the first time I watched this, I was a little bit off-put because I was expecting, a Hammer Frankenstein, and it wasn't that. And I did not particularly care for it. And when I revisited it for 1970, I liked it a little bit more. But when I came down and rewatched it now, maybe it's that it's in glorious 4K and it looks phenomenal, but I guess I gained some appreciation for it. I guess absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I actually really enjoyed this one. Now, it doesn't beat, Curse of Frankenstein or some of the other ones like Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed or Frankenstein Created Woman. It doesn't really compete with those, but I still think it's a pretty solid movie. There's a Tim Lucas commentary on here, and he rips this apart. He does a lot of great information, but he tears it down, and he gives his reasoning, and there's a lot of interviews on here, and Sangster is not precious with his movies. He doesn't think they're amazing movies, the ones he directed. He's more fond of, on Gothic horror. He wasn't a fan of Gothic horror. He wasn't, super in love with it. But he's more a fan of, his thrillers that he wrote. Taste, The Scream of Fear, and The Nanny, and stuff like that he wrote, that Seth Holt directed. But saying that, this movie is very fun and playful. And Lucas points out some things I never really guess I thought about, possibly characters being rewritten at certain times, and maybe some homosexuality in there, which I guess you do see really when you look at that. It also has David Prowse in it, who was the body stand-in for Darth Vader, actor Darth Vader, not the voice, of course, but he also pops up in Vampire Circus, and he plays the monster in another of these Hammer ones. I think the last one, the one that came after this, that brought that brought Peter Cushing back. But he's a pretty impressive guy, bodybuilder, decent monster. But this one really kind of just follows a lot of the same beats of the first film. It's not as successful. Ralph Bates is much more evil. He's much more of a sociopath, I would think. Although Peter Cushing is pretty deranged as well, especially when he rapes, I believe, a maid or somebody in the film. I can't remember exactly. Another shining star in this movie is Dennis Price, where we carry on the body snatching kind of gimmick with all these movies. Of course, Frankenstein eats bodies, and all this time you had a lot of the Burke and Hare movies being made, one with Donald Pleasence and Peter Cushing, Flesh and the Fiends. But you have a lot of that stuff kind of going on at the time with the Frankenstein movies and Burke and Hare movies, the corpse stealers, because Frankenstein eats bodies, right? Dennis Price is in here, and him and his wife play these kind of comedic, very funny characters, where Dennis Price is kind of really relaxed and doesn't do anything, and has his wife doing all the hard labor, and they have a lot of cute back and forth, which those kind of characters definitely date back all the way to the Universal kind of horror. Maybe not as grim or as macabre, but definitely those silly kind of characters are definitely in there. Think of Frankenstein, where we have the old lady who screams, "Oh no!" The comedic act, and even the Burgermeister is kind of silly in Frankenstein. There's all these kind of silly characters, and Hammer definitely carried on that tradition. And to go through all the features here, I definitely want to mention that because it will spark my memory on here. I did listen to all the commentaries, and so we have audio commentary with director Jimmy Sangster, moderated by Hammer historian Marcus Hearn. Of course, Jimmy Sangster is since past 2011, I believe. Good commentary. Now, Jimmy Sangster does repeat some of the same stories in interviews as well. So, I mean, he only, these people that have done this for years, they only have so many stories to tell. We also have a commentary by Tim Lucas. Very good commentary. He's not a super fan of the movie, but he is a super fan of Hammer, and he has a lot of information. Frankenstein, Dracula, Me, archival interview with actress Veronica Carlson. There it is. Good actress. Good insight. Did not like the comedic tone of this film. Reunion panel at 97 Festival of Fantastic Films, Manchester, with director Jimmy Sangster, actor David Prowse, actress Veronica Carlson, moderated by Wayne Kinsey. Pretty good stuff, pretty good mood and atmosphere there. They seem to be, pretty sure of what it is, And Sangster is one of those kind of guys that does kind of self-deprecating to a certain extent. Younger Frankenstein interview with second assistant director Nicholas Granby, camera operator Neil Binney, production runner Philip Campbell, and co-writer Jeremy Burnham. One Frankenstein After Another, 125 Years of Cinematic Adaptations, illustrated audio essay by Gillian Wallace Horvat. Always good to go over all the Frankensteins, and I can't remember how much this goes into all of them, but I definitely listen to these, and the Frankenstein stories are definitely engraved in my head. So many different Frankenstein films. The Life and Work of Mary Shelley interview with Dr. Emma Liggins, co-author of the Manchester Center for Gothic Studies. Interesting, too, to talk about Mary Shelley and her relationships, and how she wrote this, and her ends, and all that kind of stuff like that. Great information. The Unhallowed Arts, the creation myth of Mary Shelley interview with Gothic scholar Dr. Colin Cribbs. Now, I'm not sure which one is actually those. I remember listening to both these, and there's a lot of information about Mary Shelley and everything of that nature. Vintage behind the scenes, alternate TV credits, Scars of Dracula, Horror Frankenstein double feature as this was released, and the TV spot. It looks excellent. I really appreciate them putting them on Blu-ray and DVD. I mean, Blu-ray and 4K. Love the slip covers here. I never actually saw that cover for this. Now, what originally was a disappointment for me is a movie that I've grown some fondness for, and I think Ralph Bates is a good chunk of that. And Dennis Price, that I also look at this movie as more of a comedy than I ever did. And I also have to mention, I probably mentioned this in the previous reviews, I think that, of course, Dr. Herbert West is based off, the Lovecraft book, but I think that Stuart Gordon probably saw Horror Frankenstein and thought, I maybe want kind of this Ralph Bates style character. This character that, he's not as evil as Ralph Bates. I do think Herbert West is pretty much a sociopath, and he became, the face of the series later on, and people seem to look at him as like an anti-hero role, although he is clearly a mad scientist as a Dr. Frankenstein. But great release, great start to this set. We're going to cover all three this week because I crammed in my Hammer. Can never watch too much Hammer, right? Okay, we're moving on to the second film in the Jimmy Sangster Directs Hammer set, and this one is Lust for a Vampire. The name was originally To Be in Love with a Vampire, and they changed it. So this one is a little bit different story than, I can't show the back here because we have a little bit of nudity on there. Great cover art, too, on that one. That one's really good. This is a little bit different of a story, how Sangster got involved with this one. As he was, editing Horror Frankenstein, they approached him and said, listen, we really would like you to direct this one. It already had its cast. It already had its script. It already had everything came together, and the producers were going to be very hands-on. That's a complete opposite of Horror Frankenstein. So he ends up agreeing to do this one. This ends up sitting right in the middle of the Karstein trilogy. The first one is Vampire Lovers, 1970, directed by Roy Ward Baker. Excellent movie based on the story that predates Dracula, Carmilla, which is a vampire story, which has a hint of lesbianism, and of course, take that and run with the 70s and 60s horror movies from Jess Franco and Hammer and John Roland, of course. But then we also have Twins of Evil, which came out, I believe, 72, which, if I'm not mistaken, has David Warbeck and, of course, Peter Cushing in it, and that's a great one, too. So it's a little bit, I don't want to be negative, but Lust for a Vampire is definitely the least of the trilogy. I love Vampire Lovers, and I really like Twins of Evil. I think this one's decent. And when I recently watched this one not recently, years ago, but I watched this going through all the Hammer movies, I liked that a bit more then. And I think it's probably because maybe I was taken back by the sleaze and the nudity and being an all-girls school. I love that because it's such a trope in horror film, right? They're at an all-girls school, House of Screaming Windows, I believe that one's called. Tons of stuff. Even the Wind Screams. I think that one's House of, what is that? 1969 Spanish horror film, but Suspiria. I love the whole trope of that, right? I think it's fun. And they definitely explore it and exploit it. So this one definitely pitched at times as an erotic film. And in 1971, I guess it could be, because there's plenty of sex and plenty of nudity and of course, lesbianism. So originally, Carmilla was, she's played by Ingrid Pitt, and she was kind of this lesbian, lonely, sad, tragic vampire, but evil at the same time. And she dies in the first film, and we have this kind of mysterious character in the background, and they're kind of trying to continue that here. And there's a kind of a mysterious student. You're like, that can't be Carmilla, but they do something a little bit different. They kind of change the ideas here. It's not necessarily your standard vampire. We have like a Christopher Lee kind of stand-in character that is this evil kind of, like, I guess Karstein as well, and another character. So these evil kind of shadowy characters, and they're not exactly vampires in the flesh. They're ghost vampires. I don't know how this works. But it seems that they're kind of these spirits that possess people through time, and, and then they can move on to someone else, if that makes any sense. So this girl's been possessed at the same time. I don't know if this guy works. I can't remember his job. He's not a likable character, but the main guy's very dislikable kind of guy. And one of the commentaries on here spent most of its time tearing down this character, which I could agree with when he points a lot of this out. But he ends up falling in love with this student, who's played by someone who's like in their early 20s. But he ends up falling in love with her, and she's picking off people and killing them, but she seems to have feelings for him at the same time, so it makes things complicated. Ralph Bates is in here as a professor as well, and it was supposed to be originally Peter Cushing, but he dropped out, and old Sangster asked his good buddy Ralph Bates to step in. It's a good role. It's a small role, and the role is definitely your kind of desperate Renfield style character where he begs and begs to be turned into a vampire. Definitely a creepy character. In fact, Ralph Bates kind of plays creepy characters or weird shadowy characters in all three of these movies. But this one has some fun moments. Of course, some girls end up dead, and the evil Karstein is kind of pulling the strings and on the headmaster, and every time somebody comes in, he writes that they've had a heart attack, but even when they're young, and it's clear that they didn't. There's also the kind of gag of people being thrown in the well and cutting into it and just dropping them in the well. And there's some good dramatic moments. One of the people's daughters comes back, and he gives this speech about his daughter being dead, and it's just a really kind of really nice piece of acting in here. I do appreciate the sleaziness. I do like my erotic vampire films when they're well done. This one's fairly decently done. I like Ralph Bates in it. The cast is not as strong. I would have definitely, and the Lee stand-in is it's cringy. It's kind of embarrassing. Like they put his eyes in there at one point, Lee's eyes, and he's dubbed over. And I guess this guy came from a long line of family of actors, and he was a DJ. It just really doesn't fit. It does not parody enough or something to have a Lee stand-in where you can tell it's supposed to be Christopher Lee or something like that. It's just kind of weird and just off-putting, to be honest. There's this weird song that is in here during a love scene, and there's a great story that Sangster tells when he was with Ralph Bates seeing the movie for the first time, when I won't spoil. But this looks fantastic, and it sounds fantastic. But again, it is my least favorite of the Karstein films. It doesn't mean it's a complete avoid or anything like that. It's still a standard, solid movie, but obviously Jimmy Sangster's hands were a little bit more tied than they were with Horror Frankenstein, which isn't well regarded either, but I do think it's worth your time. As far as the features are concerned, of course, we have two commentaries, Sangster, moderated by an actress, Susanna Ley. Anne Margus Hearn, again, historian. Then we have commentary with David Flint, author of 10 Years of Terror, British Horror Films of the 70s. That's a good commentary. He really likes this movie, and he definitely points out some things here and there about it, which I definitely appreciated. Then we have illustrated archival interview with actress Junt Selvsgaard by Michael Augustine Reed with accompanied career spanning still gallery. She talks about her early life and all these things like that, where she came from, how she got started in acting, and she's an interesting person for sure. Live, Love, Lust interview with actress Judy Mason. Gothic Girl interview with actress Christian Lindhold. And now these roles aren't nearly as big, I don't think. One of them isn't. So they talk about being involved with this and all that kind of stuff like that, getting hired, working on set, how it was. Hammer Time's interview with actor Christopher Neame. That's a smaller role as well. Now, if I'm mistaken, I think one of these people here is actually, no, I don't think they have an interview with one of the other lead actresses here. Then we have interview with Christopher Neame. I said small role, bit of fun. Interview with actress Erica Beale. Lustmel, interview with actress Mel Churger. So there's a ton of interviews with actors setting up how this movie was to film and make. Running Blood interview with production runner Philip Campbell. Gates of Carcine Castle archival interview with screenwriter Tudor Gates. The Invisible Prince, The Life and Legacy of J. Sheridan Lafleur. Interview with Dr. William Hughes, Gothic scholar and co-editor of Open Graves, Open Minds, Representations of Vampires and the Undead from the Enlightenment to Present Day. Strange Love, Carmen Maria Machado, co-author of It Came from the Closet, Queer Reflections of Horror Reflames the Sapphiric Vampire. That's good because it goes over all sorts of different vampire films and lesbianism, and they're talking about the Hammer films, of course, and some early Universal, I believe, and Carmilla and how it ties in. Interesting stuff if you're a fan of old literature, horror literature, and films. And then we have School of Heaving Bosom, Education, Eroticism, and the Lust for a Vampire video essay by Dr. Alexandra Heller Nichols. Also good stuff. So, alternate version of the lesbian scene. So there's tons of stuff to have in here. A lot of good special features on this one that I think make it worth the purchase, worth watching. I like the movie. It's just my least favorite of the Karstein trilogy, and putting them as a Karstein trilogy is kind of hurts the movie, right? Because you're automatically going to compare it to those two films. And if you could take it on your own, I think you'll enjoy it. Although it does have definitely some storylines going on with the first one. Okay, the final film in the Hammer box set is 1972's Fear in the Night. Now, Sangster wrote a bunch of gothic, or not gothic films, but he also wrote a bunch of thrillers at the time after stuff like Psycho and Diabolique came out in the late 50s, early 60s. So he wrote these, what they called Hitchcockian kind of style thrillers like Nightmare and Paranoiac and Scream of Fear and stuff like that. And this was an old script from that time period that never got made. So they kind of reworked it and ended up having him direct it. And it again stars Ralph Bates. It also has Judy Geeson from Inseminoid, other horror films, Joan Collins, and the man, the myth, the legend, right on the cover here, Peter Cushing. That actually isn't Peter Cushing right on the cover here. It's probably an old cover there. And this movie originally was going to be called The Claw at one point, which is not a great name. But yeah, what we have here is a little bit of kind of a gaslighting story. We basically have four main characters. That's pretty much it. And Ralph Bates marries Judy Geeson. She's excited to kind of move away, but she's moving to an isolated location. That's not a great start here. And we have an all-boys school this time around instead of the all-girls school that was in Lust for the Vampire. So we have an all-boys school, and almost immediately, even before she moves there, she's attacked, or she says she's attacked, and they think she might be suffering from a nervous breakdown that she just got over and might be continuing that. And they end up going to this just abandoned boys' school. And the opening's great. It reminds me a lot of Sleepaway Camp, which I probably lifted somewhat from this, right, where you see the old camp and you hear the laughing and things like that. This is how the Fear of the Night opens. We hear the basically the school grounds with laughing and children and all these noises, but it's basically just a very quiet fall kind of afternoon, and we just end on these beautiful trees and everything like that, and we stop and we see a person who's been hanged, which is really kind of a great way to start it. Reminds me a bit of the scene in Jonathan where we have the one shot and it goes through and then we end in a church and a priest has hung himself or been hung. So I think that's a really great way to start this. And as we kind of start slow after that, we kind of introduce Judy Geeson. We get an idea who she is and Ralph Bates. And there's probably about 40 minutes, I'd say, of setting things up before we have any real kind of shock and suspense and things of that nature. But it definitely takes its time setting it up. I think the acting's all really solid from the four main leads. Peter Cushing as a one hand, kind of a hook, and he's genuinely really creepy, and he's like a giant red herring, so you know it can't be necessarily that. The movies that typically have these giant red herrings and then go with the red herring almost become like a swerve, but it becomes funny at the same time for me. Joan Collins is actually married to Peter Cushing here, or they're related. I have a hard time believing Joan Collins is married to him, maybe like the father deal or something of that nature. Like, I believe they said married, but I'm like, really? But so what happens is we get the gaslighting story where things start to happen. There's near deaths all the time. And some people start to play a little bit of tricks here. Peter Cushing is definitely used as somewhat of a ominous kind of evil force throughout the movie, and he does really well. The scene with him and Judy Geeson where he's like pulling her hair is pretty nerve-wracking. Ralph Bates is solid again. Everybody's solid in here, and the ending is definitely worth watching, definitely worthwhile. But it's kind of like, I don't want to say standard, but it's definitely your standard kind of thriller gaslighting story from this time with a great location, great cinematography, and great acting. As far as the special features go, we got a bunch. Gaslight Playbook. We're skipping here. We have the UHD, of course, audio commentary with producer, co-writer Jimmy Sangster and Marcus Hearn. Audio commentary David Flint, author of 10 Years of Terror, British Horror Films of the 70s, and Mayhem's Films Festivals, Chris Cook. Good commentaries. Then we have an audio with Peter Cushing discussing Hammer, an archival interview with Dennis, Meekley, author of The History of Horrors, The Rise and Fall of the House of Hammer. That's good stuff. He talks about working with all these people and why him and Lee continued, all this kind of stuff like that. And then we have the Disc 2, the Blu-ray, with the film on it. And then we have these features, the Gaslighters Playbook, Real and Imagined Horrors and Fear in the Night, video essay by Dr. Alexandra Heller-Nicholas. This is good. Talks about, the fake outs and the things, how this works, because it's a little different, because usually it's always a person that has their head on straight a lot of times, but she's already suffered from this mental illness before. But I could see that. That's common. Even if you look at something like Let's Scare Jessica to Death from 1971, it's kind of that same vibe where she just got over some sort of trauma and she's moving to this place, so it's an unreliable narrator. No one trusts her, but I think it was effective. A fun in the day interview with camera operator Neil Binney and production runner Philip Campbell. And then we have disc 3 here. And this is a bonus disc, the 7th disc here. And this is basically all special features, but there is a Hammer and Beyond the Jimmy Sangster Legacy 2026 documentary by film Hammer historian Michael Hearn. Good stuff here. And it has archival stuff with Jimmy Sangster and a bunch of the other people involved with Jimmy Sangster. Talks about, all these people that worked with him. And the thing that I really liked about it is they kind of divide his career as he had these second, third waves in his career. The first being, that kind of writer started with like X the Unknown for Hammer, writing stuff, and had his gothic phase, and then he had his director phase, and then he moved forward and he ended up writing a lot of other stuff, and then he had eventually his TV America phase where he's writing for that stuff. So Sangster is very prolific, and they seem to really like him and talk about how much he was basically a working man's writer, that kind of thing. He has a lot of funny stories, some of them which are kind of like dogging on himself a bit. He's shocked that people love these movies. Remembered, the man from Bristol, Ralph Bates, remembered interviews with actress wife Virginia Wetherell and composer's son Will Bates, narrated by Lust for a Vampire co-star Judy Matheson. Really depressing. Ralph Bates died really young at 51 years old of aggressive cancer, and it's just a loss. He obviously was very talented, good actor, would have continued on, but nothing but great things to say about Ralph Bates. Everybody seemed to love the man. Joan Collins, Queen of Horror Films, interviews with Horse of Psychotic Women author Kayla Janice and telefilm historian Amanda Reyes. This is also great, talking about Joan Collins kind of shit on these movies, but if it wasn't for that, she never would have landed some of her big roles, because this basically set the precedent for that she could do that. So it's great stuff as well. Hammer in the USA, film historian C. Courtney Joyner on the studio's stateside distribution, which is a nightmare. Not his featurette, it's great, but it's, if you've ever looked to pick these up and wondering who owns them, and they released, these are all Studio Canal, but you're looking through that Columbia has so many of these, and they just are all divided in the States. That's why there's never going to be a Hammer single box set like that, but that's interesting as well. And he also talks about what was sold well, that's why they made all these deals. And then we have Hammer Scribe, archival interview with Jimmy Sangster. A lot of stories repeated out from the commentary on here. Sapphiric Bloodsuckers, a cinematic history of the lesbian vampire trope with Annie Ross. Melmoth, film scholar and host of Girls, Guts, and Giallo. I Coined the Karstein Trilogy, interview with David Prairie, author of Heritage of Horror. He mentions, no one really used it before that. And, so all these interviews, all this supplemental stuff, tons of great stuff. And if that's not enough for you guys, there is this glorious book with a very lurid, the most lurid picture that Jimmy Sangster ever shot, I guess, on the cover here. Just a beautiful book here, very thick, tons of great pictures. There's Ralph Bates and Judy Geeson right there. talks about hysteria, early thrillers that, of course, Jimmy Sangster wrote. So really thick book with tons of contributions from people. Let me make sure I don't forget everyone. There's tons of people. David Gregory does the opening here, but you got Bruce Hadenbeck and tons of people. Chris Alexander. There's tons of people on here. Yeah, great stuff. A lot of recognizable names. But I was very happy with this release here. A win. I just don't know if anybody does these box sets better than Severin. I think they're the box set kings. They're just beautiful sets, heavy, don't feel cheap, remastered to beautiful images, and they do tons of features. And I like the features because half the time you'll watch a movie and you're like, that's okay. And then you get the context and you're like, that makes it better. That makes it more interesting for me. But that's just me personally. Great set from Severin Films. Okay, guys, we're continuing Jackie Chan's breakout hits. And the next one on the line, this beautiful 4K set here, pulling out here. That didn't sound right, pulling out. But we got Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx, and this has two versions, of course, the Hong Kong and the international cut. The international cut, I believe, I don't know if there's a U.S. cut as well, but the international cut is significantly shorter, and most people prefer the Hong Kong cut here. So Rumble in the Bronx is a Golden Harvest picture here, and talking about Jackie Chan, this is probably the first Jackie Chan movie that I was even familiar with, was Rumble in the Bronx. That it got released here, and I think New Line handled the distribution here, and I remember being wacky and weird and fun, and the whole gimmick of the stunts and everything like that. So rewatching it, I was very interested to rewatch the long cut, the 106-minute cut here. And it's funny because it's Rumble in the Bronx, but as they point out in tons of the commentaries and features, it's clearly Canada. It's definitely Canada with mountains in the background and the way people act. But this one opens up, and they cut out a lot of the subplots in the American version, according to Frank Jin and Frank DeSanto. We open up, and we're having Jackie, he's a cop from Hong Kong, and he's meeting his uncle, and there's this store that they run that's kind of in the hood, in the Bronx, of course, and there's obviously a lot of trouble going on, and his uncle's trying to sell it, kind of fools some poor, Hong Kong woman into buying it for a price, and Jackie Chan's sticking around, and immediately there's trouble, right? There's these gangs that come in, and Jackie Chan defends her to a certain extent, beats up a couple of these bad guys, a couple of which pop up in other Jackie Chan movies, of course. Now, again, the bad guys are basically littered with stuntmen, a lot of them Canadian stuntmen, but he does bring in a couple of his team that you'd recognize from his other films here. So, there's something a little bit different about this one. A lot of Jackie Chan's movies have their own style. They have their own kind of tone and everything, and they never get too super dark. I mean, dark or really dark, like a lot of the other Hong Kong movies. But some of them do dip a little bit darker than this one. And this one has a couple moments. I think a guy getting put in a wood chipper is probably crossing a line for this movie's tone. And I don't know how to put this movie's tone. This feels like a live-action Streets of Rage, a live-action cartoon, a live-action comic book. But there's a lot of kind of mediocre acting here. Jackie Chan's great. He's charming. The fights are amazing. The choreographing is amazing. And essentially what happens is Jackie Chan gets tied up with this gang of overly colorful dressed characters that look like they're out of Batman Forever or something. Joel Schumacher would have put this gang together, if that makes any sense. But these guys that are overly dressed and wacky and weird, and he starts kind of beefing with them and fighting and trying to protect this store, but at the same time he ends up meeting pretty much the main kind of gang member's girlfriend, and ends up meeting that girl's son, brother, who's in a wheelchair. So we bring in all this kind of stuff too. That's obviously to bring in a lot of the audience. And the kid in the wheelchair is not a very good actor. A lot of his scenes are absolutely hilarious because he's always talking about his new wheelchair cushion, which becomes almost like I guess a MacGuffin in it, or what you will, but a very comical when he's like, my new wheelchair cover, says that. You're like, this is bad. But it's also charming in the same aspect, right? This kid didn't go on to be a big star or anything like this. I think this is his only movie. But Jackie Chan starts off small fighting these guys. And there's a great scene where they actually beat the shit out of Jackie with a bunch of bottles in an alleyway that I thought was amazingly effective. But it ends up kind of revealing that one of these gang members had stolen some items from some big bads. And the big bads are pretty much no-nonsense guys, except a couple of them. They're still comedic. As serious it is, it's still kind of silly in a lot of ways. But I think the big bads here are really effective, especially the guy with the glasses. He's just no bullshit kind of guy, and I think it works. There's language in this cut, even though the tone would suggest this is solidly a PG-13 movie. movie. I guess the Hong Kong version, Frank Jin points out that, cussing in English doesn't give it an R rating or change the rating in Hong Kong, but if they were to cuss in Hong Kong, it's immediate X rating or immediate Cat 3 title rating, which is insane to me. But like I said, this one gets wacky, it gets crazy. There's tons of gags that continue with the store being ripped to pieces throughout the entire movie. It almost feels like there's a love triangle that's going to happen. It doesn't really happen, and Jackie starts dating like the gang leader's girlfriend, and they start a relationship. But it's weird. A lot of it does feel like it's this cartoon kind of world. But overall, I really actually caught myself enjoying it. There's a crazy wild chase at the end that goes on for a really long time, with like an airboat kind of deal on land, which I thought was effective. As far as the features, we got a slew of them. Original lossless Cantonese English sync sound stereo and English export dub mono. Optional subtitles, of course. Brand new commentary by martial arts cinema experts Frank Jin and Frank D. DeSanto. Breakout Part 2, new feature with Stuntman Mars, Stuntwoman Kathy Hubble, martial arts cinema expert Ricky Baker, and critics David West and James Munge look back at the film. Good stuff. They talk about when this came out, where it played in the theaters, and when they worked with Jackie, how they worked with Jackie, how they thought the movie was, all that kind of stuff. Rumble Recollections, an expanded interview with Hubble. That's a stuntwoman from the motorcycle scene. Alternate footage, textless outtakes. Of course, the outtakes are infamous at the end of a Jackie Chan movie. Everybody getting hurt. Original dubless. Then we have the international cut, English dub, lossless stereo. 5.1 as well. Optional English subtitles, electronical press kit with Jackie Chan. 2 scenes added for network television version, United States TV spots. So Rumble in the Bronx looks great in 4K, sounds great, wacky, weird, fun movie. Yeah, good stuff. I enjoyed it. Okay, we're moving on to the next one in the Jackie Chan set, and this is Thunderbolt. And truth be told, this is a Jackie Chan movie that I had not heard about. The other movies in the set I had heard about, Mr. Nice Guy, First Strike, all that kind of stuff I was familiar with. This one kind of skipped over me, and it's bizarre, too, because it was an enormous hit in Hong Kong. It did really well in Hong Kong, according to Frank Jin and Frank DeSanto. Just did really well. But I guess it just doesn't have the lasting impression that a lot of his other films have. But this one was a huge budgeted movie. It's international. It has all these different kind of aspects of, America, Hong Kong, Japan, all that kind of stuff like that. Maybe they don't go to America, but they definitely are in Hong Kong a lot and dive into Japan. Jackie Chan is basically like a car racer mechanic. His dad is a cop. They both know a lot about cars. Jackie Chan used to be an expert racer, but he left that life. He's not into that life. He basically takes care of his family, 2 younger sisters and his father. And they live in this weird kind of like area. It's like right above the shop and everything like that. And one day, he kind of gets involved with this. His dad is he's helping his dad kind of track down criminals with these like illegal cars. Basically in Hong Kong, it's a big deal to have your car basically souped up in illegal stuff and add-ons and all that stuff like that. And they're kind of arresting these people. And this guy whizzes by going super fast, and Jackie Chan ends up getting the better of him. And this guy ends up being a mass criminal, and we learn that he's a murderer. So the Interpol's trying to get him. Interpol's the main guy, and there's like Michael Wong, who's speaks perfect English. I think he's half Hong Kong, half American, half British, but he's in a bunch of Hong Kong films, and he's kind of like another kind of major character in this film, and he definitely wants to get this guy arrested for good. But of course these guys are bad, and they're going to come up with a bunch of things up their sleeve. Jackie Chan ends up lying and getting this guy put away, but it doesn't end there. This is when the movie kind of picks up to be completely and utterly crazy. Besides a couple fight scenes before this scene, there's not really that much going on. This character development and bringing in the reporter and all that kind of stuff like that, and setting up love interests and things of that nature. Jackie Chan in this is a very private guy. Hell, the theme music kind of sets him up, in the beginning and end. That's like, you got to be quiet, you got to put forth your best effort all the time. That's the only way to succeed. This kind of stuff, very heroic kind of message within this movie. But what happens is this scene that's right out of the Terminator. This group of terrorists end up trying to break this guy out. This speed racer guy who's like an international criminal. And what ensues is this giant amazing shootout in the police station, which almost feels like it comes from a John Woo movie or something of that nature. It's pretty graphic and crazy and doesn't really feel in place, but I'm not going to complain. And there's a couple of people that got killed in there, and like people are upset about it, but then they seem to just brush over it. It's very bizarre. But as an act of revenge, this guy comes out and he wants to, he does some things to Jackie Chan and forces him to partake in this giant one last race. So a lot of it is that classic martial arts trope where it's like, this bad guy hurt me, he hurt my hands, or he beat me in front of everyone, now I have to go retrain. But instead of martial arts or any of that nature, he's retraining to race, and he's got the reporter that's by his side trying to document him when he doesn't want to be documented. That adds all this element, and it's all going to lead up to this giant race. And since Rumble in the Bronx was such a hit, they kind of changed some of the endings here and made it more light and less harsh. But there's some amazing scenes within this movie, like a whole house gets torn apart with some heavy machinery, and that scene is just wild. The stunts in here have to be insane. And of course, that amazing shootout. Overall, I thought Thunderbolt was good. Just as good as Rumble in the Bronx, completely different, a little bit more serious in a lot of aspects. Jackie Chan is really great in this one. As far as the features are concerned, we have the uncut 110 International version. Then we also have the Japanese cut. Brand new commentary by martial arts expert Frank Gin and DeSanto. Breakout Part 3, new featurette with Stuntman Mars. Critics David West, David Mungen. The dubbing supervisor Paul Clay look back at the film, a thunderous presence, an expanded interview with Clay and his collaborators with Jackie Chan, and alternate English export credits, textless outtakes, international trailer, Japanese trailer, image gallery, reversible sleeve featuring original newly commissioned artwork by Sam Hadley. And then, of course, we got the brand new 4K restoration here. We have it in Cantonese, English, and then we have an English export dub, stereo, and English US dub. So we have tons of stuff going on here. Enjoyed both of those quite a bit, and can't wait to come back and watch the other three, and Police Story 4, First Strike, Mr. Nice Guy, and Who Am I, to finish out the set. Hopefully we'll get through them all next week. But great stuff, good commentaries as always, and very enjoyable stuff. Love Jackie Chan. Okay, the next one here is from Radiance Films, and this is, I'm not going to try to say the French name, La tête, contre, murs, which is Head Against the Wall, 1959, and I think this may be the directorial debut of Georges Franchot, who would go on to direct Eyes Without a Face the very next year, which is a classic horror film, incredibly influential horror film, and I guess you could see a little bit of that kind of in here. Now, Jean-Pierre Macchi stars in this film. Jean-Pierre Macchi would go on to direct several movies. He's in Latan, he's in Solo, which I covered on here, a very recognizable French actor and a very prolific French director as well. So originally, this has an interesting backstory. Jean-Pierre Macchi wanted to direct this, and he really couldn't get the funding, or he couldn't get it off the ground, so he approached Georges Franchot, I'm probably saying his name wrong, to direct this, and he had done a bunch of short films that had somewhat of an extreme kind of edge to them, and they got the money for this, and they decided to go ahead. Now, I believe this is based off a book, and it's definitely focusing on this kind of mental illness, psychiatric wards of the time. I bet it go well, the book, or at least the movie, can go well sort of with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a book originally written in the 50s by Ken Kesey, which is a great book and made into a fantastic movie in 75, which is kind of dealing with some of the same issues, right? People that are wrongfully put in a psychiatric ward, or maybe that they need different treatment and they're not getting what they need. But essentially what we come here is Jean-Pierre Macchi is a very handsome young man. His father kind of dislikes him. They have some turmoil. There's a very shady history with the mother passing and all that kind of stuff like that. Definitely, there's more than meets the eye, more than a lot of people understand to this story. But he's kind of out all night, and he doesn't commit to anything, and he steals from the father, and he abused him. So his father had him committed to this mental institution, and once he's in there, it's impossible for him to get out, and he becomes basically the patient of this doctor, who at times he says these really wonderful things, but at the same time he's stuck in his mindset where he believes, I'm a doctor, I'm here to cure patients, but my number one job is to protect the society from these patients, and he kind of takes that approach, while there's another doctor in here who's more likely to have that idea where he takes a massive interest in these patients, and he's looking forward to more of a cure. So you have your classic thing here where you have these two doctors with these two different outlooks and everything like that, and we have Jean-Pierre Macchi stuck in the middle of this idea, and he's at the same time he's falling in love with a new woman who he's met just right before he got in here, and she's visiting him, and he's also having these struggles with his father, and you do have these kind of sad moments where he has unveils a little bit about himself, but at the same time you can see that he does have some issues where he refuses to stop trying to escape, and all this kind of stuff like that. He meets a lot of kind of strange characters within here, not as extreme as something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where we're riddled with character actors with all these kind of over the top personas and illnesses and things like that. They're not that extreme. There's this one kind of quiet guy who was actually, there's an interview with him on here, and he was a singer before. This was kind of his film breakthrough, and he's exceptional in here. He suffers from epileptic seizures, and he's a sad kind of tragic character, right? The kind of sad person that you feel like definitely does not belong in this kind of place. But as it progresses, we do have these kind of come to God moments for some of the doctors, really sad moments, and you could really write the doctor here that ends up popping up. I think he's in Eyes Without a Face as well. But Arthur, what is his name? Fantastic actor here. I believe it is. He's not listed on here, I don't think. But this actor here, he has these really poignant moments. Like his dialogue when he says things like that. He's like, "I'm not a judge. I'm a doctor. I'm not a police officer. The stuff like that, the stuff he says to him, at first you think, well, maybe this guy's going to get him back on track. But then as it progresses, you realize that his stubbornness and the way his mind is set, he's just not going to let things go. But it also doesn't paint him completely as a villain, which I thought was one of the more nuanced things. The questions he asked the father, I think, are interesting. And I think that it's more fair. It's a more fair kind of assessment at looking at a hospital than some of the things that would just clearly come in with broad strokes and paint these characters so villainous or so good natured. But I thought this was a very good movie, very tragic, very sad, but at the same time it's hard to kind of sympathize at John Pierre Macchia at certain aspects because he's not a very bright person, but again he's also suffering a bit. As far as the special features are concerned, we have 4K restoration. And then we have archival interview with star and screenwriter John Pierre Macchi. Talks about getting this off the set, getting this made, and he actually directed part of this movie along with, I think, the cinematographer, as the director fell a little bit ill when he witnesses suicide. And then we have archival interview with director Georges Francouz, which is on television, and interview with Charles Aznavour, an interview with Macchi's assistant and friend Eric Leroy, newly improved English subtitle translation. So all this stuff is a lot of information, how this movie got started, about John Pierre Macchi, just live television stuff too, which is also interesting to see how, the reporters and journalists approach this kind of thing here. But great movie. Really enjoyed this one. Interesting stuff. Okay, this next one from Cult Epics is a real wild one here, and the title is VD, and this is by Wim Verstappen. This is a Dutch film. The director did Blue Movie, which is a pretty big deal at the time, very graphic for the time, and kind of like changed, made a lot of money and just changed how Dutch films were made, Dutch films were perceived, a lot of that stuff here. And this is produced by Scorpio Films. And Scorpio Films, Cult Epics puts out a lot of their stuff, a lot of interesting stuff. Frank and Eva, I think, is one of those as well. Might also be a Wim Verstappen movie. And VD, the title alone, it caught my interest. Obviously, you think venereal disease, and that does fit the title here to a certain extent. And looking at maybe this decay of this family, the decay of these people, and how they carry themselves and portray themselves. I have never seen a movie with more complicated incest storylines than this. This movie is, I guess, a lot of it's satirical to look at this. There's big business, there's capitalism, the I guess the contraceptive world. It has to be, but it's played incredibly straight. So you're seeing all these ridiculous things happen, but it feels real. It never feels completely fake. So, oh boy, how do I follow this? Basically, Von Dorn, that's why it's VD, is that he runs this meatpacking factory, and also they sell contraceptives on the side, which seems insane, right? But when you think about it, a lot of these companies have their hands dipped in a lot of things. So the opening of this movie takes no prisoners. Right away, we see the inside of the butcher shop. We see cows on their sides, blood pouring out of their throats, struggling to breathe, and that kind of sets the mood for this movie. Obviously, the most graphic things in the film. Now, the subject matters are pretty nasty and weird as well. And so we have basically Von Dorn, who is the patriarch of this family, and you learn pretty quick that he's in a loveless marriage that he was basically forced into to take over the factory, and that's how this whole family lineage works. They're sleeping with each other's girlfriends and daughters, and there's a lot of passive incest, which are really gross and really intense. And if I were to get in the weeds and try to explain who's related to who and why, and all these kind of people pulling these kind of different things in the background to get control of this company, it would be an absolute mess. You'd have to watch it. But essentially what we do is follow the family politics of this, and while they try to survive by bringing in this new contraceptive that they're pulling in from Bulgaria, which is an absolute kind of sham, which becomes hilarious as well, because a lot of the people that they had on their sides are actually suffering from the contraceptive not working. Contraceptive chaos, if you will. But a lot of it is kind of maneuvering through these people, and of course tragedy strikes, dark things do happen, and it ends up being a pretty nasty kind of film, drama, but it's also darkly comedic because it's so nasty. And I don't mean like you're going to see gore or anything of that nature, but just the mindset of these people, and I do feel like it could possibly be some of these rich families are actually like this. Well acted, really well acted, well directed. A lot of these actors do appear in Blue Movie. One of the kids, for sure, I remember exactly him in that film. And Blue Movie is a movie that I did watch, and it's been probably years since I've seen it, so it's quite a little bit shaky in my memory. As far as the special features, we have a 2K restoration. We have audio commentary by film historian Peter Verstraeten, Festival of Love short film by Wim Verstappen, which has some of the same actors as well. Photo gallery, Scorpio film trailers, new artwork designed by by Juan Esteban, a reversible sleeve with original Dutch poster. And this is a movie that I've not really heard many people bring about, but if animal cruelty is going to shun you away, and it's edited and cut into a lot of the scenes, kind of suggesting things of that nature. There's a really funny orgy scene in here, I know, where these cops walk in because there's been like this big party where they're trying to like push this contraceptive, which is probably the funniest scene in the movie, where one of the characters basically like makes a giant stand and stops and pauses for the camera so they can get all this kind of good publicity towards it. But so there's this orgy scene where these people are all having sex using the contraceptive, and the cops walk in and they all kind of freeze up and they're just kind of waiting, and that's pretty comical. But yeah, interesting movie. It's something that's a bit odd and a bit different, but I don't think I've ever... All the Dutch films that Cult Epics have put out have been pretty wild and weird, but they do have their own flavor. I would recommend this one if you like weird, kind of satirical dramas. Okay, I'm going to be somewhat brief with this. I ended up going to see Masters of the Universe, the new Master of the Universe, and we all know that they've been trying to get a Master of the Universe movie off the ground for quite some time, had a lot of issues with it, and they probably were in the hole by the time this movie started. People buying rights, people writing scripts. I think John Woo was going to do one at one point. We know that it was a toy line that was made into a cartoon show, had comic books and stuff of that nature. So Master Universe and He-Man in the early 80s was a huge hit. In 1987, Canon made a movie that pretty much was a critical failure, probably a box office failure as well. It has a certain cult following amongst it now, starring Frank Langella and Dolph Lundgren. I am a huge fan of the film, and I grew up surrounded by Master Universe toys. My brother was a big fan, a little bit older than me. They were all around. I grew up with the toys. I grew up with the reboots in the early 2000s, which I loved, and I always had a fondness for Master Universe 87 and the toys and the characters, and I look into them. I don't remember the original cartoon quite as much as I should. It's a very dated cartoon show, but the villains and the designs and the toys were something that stuck with me throughout the entire 80s and 90s that I was alive. So I had some vested interest in this, and I had heard some mixed things about it, but then it was coming back that it was pretty decent. So I was like, well, I'm going to go check it out. I have to see for myself, and I want to do minimal spoilers on this, and I will do spoilers after. But so right away I started, and of course, with the Master Universe world, it's goofy with the characters like Beastman and Ram Man and Fisto. So you either play it straight and you maybe possibly become a joke automatically, right? Or you kind of embrace the idea that this is silly, and you give a reason, an alternative reason for why the characters are named this. And they do this pretty well. Now we have the same issue that we had in the first film. People don't want to see Earth. They want to see Eternia. But this sets up a nice little storyline where it gives Prince Adam the idea that he was destined for more. This movie starts off with a great battle, great invasion, where it introduces all its characters at a breakneck speed. And in that moment, you spot a lot of the characters that are going to be throughout the movie, and there's some surprises in there who they chose to put in here. I know everybody's probably spoiled it, but there's a lot of surprises of the characters they chose, some of which I thought were great, some of which I was happy with. I wasn't disappointed with any of them. I just wanted to see more. But they do a couple in cameos as well. But I thought that opening really grabbed my attention. I thought the person that they got to play Prince Adam and He-Man was spectacular. I thought he was a great actor. I thought he carried the right demeanor, and they're going for more of a Guardians of the Galaxy style humor, and it worked. I thought the soundtrack was fantastic. I thought they using like themes and shout outs to original properties and other things that people associate with Master Universe was also brilliant. And it is a little long, but I didn't feel the runtime too bad. Idris Elba is fantastic as Man-at-Arms. I thought he was probably one of the saving graces of the movie for me. I don't want to say that because it's like, oh, saving grace, and I liked most of the movie, but he's one of the best damn things in the movie is Idris Elba. He's comedic, and he's tough, and he just works really well, and he's such a good actor that he can take, I guess B material and make it A material with stuff like the Suicide Squad as well, and anything he pops up in, I think he's fantastic. I really like the cast. Now, I know Jared Leto is like box office poison, and originally when I was young, Jared Leto was this star, and everyone was like, oh, he's really good, Requiem for a Dream, and then he became this character of like over the top. You hear these stories, and you're like, what an asshole, what a douche, and he's just everywhere. And I'm not going to base it on his personality in real life. I thought he handled Skeletor pretty well. Now, Skeletor is like digital and stuff, but the voice is Jared Leto, and I think that it's more close to obviously the cartoon than Frank Langella was. My favorite part of the original Master Universe is the Langella Skeletor. It's hard to beat that, but Jared Leto, I think, does it justice. Alison Brie's Evil Lynn is also really good, and I don't want to spoil a bunch of the other characters that pop up in here, but they're fun, and you get to see some of the ones you didn't get to see in the other film. Obviously, you get to see some of them too, which was a surprise. But I thought this was great. I thought it was entertaining. I wish it made more money so we could see a sequel and see some of the other characters pop up. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. it is a big blockbuster superhero movie. But if you like Guardians, or you like something along that lines, or you're a big fan of Master Universe and you're not too precious about the source material, I think you'll get a damn kick out of it. I enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit. And some of the CGI is iffy, with like Cringer, but hey, it kind of works because Eternia is this magical world, and the movie does take place predominantly in Eternia, which I did like. So great stuff. I really liked it. It's not going to be for everybody, but I stand by it. I thought it was a lot of fun. All right, let's get to those 1983 movies.
I have returned.
Okay. Show me.
Where is the music now? The sound of laughter. There was never laughter.
What's it like?
What's what like?
Screwing a psycho.
What the fuck was that?
It's gone.
God blows dead dogs. Just lay it in there.
Eat shit and die, Ricky!
Eat shit and live, Bill.
Yeah, Bill, he's a little wet.
31. 32. 32. Year of a man's prime. Loved by many women. You might still learn to swim. 32. Going. Gone.
The kid was cut in half, Arnie. They had to scrape his legs up with a shovel.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do with shit? Scrape it up with a little shovel.
One final moment of revenge.
Wondering what's real. All of it is real.
You want to see something really scary? You bet. Really? Yeah.
Get the video, Joe! Long live the new flesh!
No choice but to kill the son of a bitch.
Living one's entire life in a state of fear. It is all I have ever known. Fear.
Are you ready? Okay, go ahead. What are you doing?
Okay, the first one up, I decided to knock out a couple of the post-apocalyptic movies I watched, and this is Rush, and I heard this is one of the worst post-apocalyptic Italian movies in 1983, and they're not wrong. So I don't even know how this necessarily begins, but we know that basically there's been a post-apocalyptic war. No mutants in this one, no monsters in this one, no crazy, fun, weird, crazy shit like in a lot of the other ones. It's essentially just a post-apocalyptic world where Gordon Mitchell is a baddie, and he is a totalitarian asshole Nazi-style character, and he's going to kill whoever doesn't follow his orders. So he runs into the main lead, and essentially this entire movie is this guy running around shooting at these bad guys, them falling down, him chucking these grenades and blowing up things. There's not really any nuance in the characters to me. It's rather kind of boring, to be honest. I am actually mixing up both of the post-apocalyptic movies that I watched this week, although the other one is a bit better, a little bit more fun. But if I'm not mistaken, this one does have kind of a love interest character. I don't know if it goes very far. The fight scene with Gordon Mitchell is fine. I do like this one better than Exterminators of the Year 3000. I thought that one was just absolutely abysmal because they was boring, it was tedious, and they didn't even have a good bad guy. This one at least has a known factor as a known name as a bad guy. You need need that in these kind of movies. If like you need a heavy that has some name recognition or at least some screen presence. If you don't, it falls completely apart. The lead guy's fine. It's more of a Rambo kind of riff when half the movie is him running through the woods shooting at bad guys. There's not many squibs, and it doesn't necessarily work all that well. There's some fun moments, of course. He does get put, hopefully I'm not mixing these movies up, but he gets put in this kind of weird camp where he has to survive. And he ends up running to this guy named Steel, who he ends up beating up. And Steel's like this badass guy, but Steel is just like a regular old-looking dude. And there's some squibs there, some fun to be had there. But most of the movie is just run and gun, not much going on. It feels like a really bad Antonio Margheriti movie. And it was the director, Tonio Ricci. I think he ended up... Didn't he direct Panic from 1982, which is not a great horror film, but not a horrible horror film either. This is completely mediocre. Non-stop action. But it becomes tedious and boring because it's the same old. It's not particularly well done. But that is Rush. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, the next one from 1983 is Warrior of the Lost World. And this is directed by David Worth, but it's an Italian co-production. And this stars some names. It has some face recognition here. Robert Ginty from Exterminator stars in it. It's also got Fred the Hammer Williamson in a very small role, and Donald Pleasance. It's got Greta Geretta. Gotta love Greta from Demons. And Shock, what is that one? Shock something, the Bruno Mattei movie. I'm glad I probably forgot the title of that. That's good for me. But so anyways, this one's a lot more fun. It's of course a post-apocalyptic world, and Robert Ginty, they explain in the very beginning what's going on. There's like radiation wars, and it's hilarious. And then it's like this person set up to become the boom, and it pops up as an Italian because it's like probably a longer cut, and it's fucking hilarious. The music is a little bit more memorable. Although actually I think in the other film it was Francesco Damasi who did the music, and I remember the music being actually one of the best parts of the movie. I don't remember who does the music in this one. Maybe I'm mixing these up. These are all very similar movies. But Robert Ginty drives this motorcycle that talks to him. It's very cheesy. It's pretty terrible actually, and they'd be like, bogus, tubular. It's fucking dumb, but it's funny, I'm gonna be honest. Robert Ginty is doing kind of like his best Clint Eastwood, where he's like quiet, rugged, tough, kind of witty to a certain extent, and he ends up getting kind of pulled in by these group of the new wave kind of people, new way, that want to change the world because Donald Pleasance is this Nazi-esque character that wants to destroy everything and have everybody fall under his weird broken hand thing. He's dressed just like Blofeld in this one. He's kind of like that style, but the new way basically forces Robert Ginty to help them break out their kind of leader, their professor leader. It's confusing because they keep calling the leader Professor, and then Prosper or something is the bad guy name. Really dumb fucking bad guy name for Donald Pleasance. But of course, Fred the Hammer Williamson's going to help, and there's going to be a giant shootout of all this ragtag group of survivors that ends up teaming up with the New Way, which are kind of weird mutant people, including Greta. They're not mutants, but they're like kind of circus folk, very bizarre characters. There is mutants in this movie too, which I appreciated, that are in a cave. But yeah, it leads up to this giant battle. The battle is okay. There's a hilarious scene where poor Robert Ginty's poor motorcycle gets ran over, and it's like, get out of here, and it's it doesn't say that, but it might as well. It's actually kind of sad, but it's also funny. Donald Pleasance is fun in it. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's chewing the scenery. And he gets shot a lot. I spoiled it, I know, but you'll be okay. He gets shot a lot, but there's more that meets the eye. They're setting up Warrior of the Lost World for a sequel. Why didn't we get one? I'll tell you why. Probably because it didn't do all that fucking well, because there's 12 fucking movies just like this year, and they're all better than it besides The Rush and Exterminators from the Year 3000. It's not horrible. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's got a decent cast. The dubbing is pretty bad, ADR kind of style, unless there's no way they're speaking their language on the set. I mean, they were not capturing audio here, because the dubbing for the most part is pretty bad. It comes across on the acting. I don't know if that's Robert Ginty's voice. It sounds like it is. It was that Scarab movie this year. Robert Ginty is doing pretty mediocre this year, but yeah, Warrior of the Lost World, not great, not the worst of its kind, but kind of entertaining nonetheless. Okay, the Patreon pick is Failsafe. Yes. Now, this was always told to me that, this is the serious version of Doctor Strangelove, or how I learned to stop worrying and learn to love the bomb. I love Doctor Strangelove. Great movie by Stanley Kubrick. So Failsafe and this are always brought up in the same sentence. And Failsafe, the only thing I ever heard is it's a serious version of it, and I didn't hear much about it. But here it's kind of interesting. So Doctor Strangelove was based on a book that actually, Red Alert? That sued the author of Failsafe, and they settled outside of court because these are both based on books. Failsafe came out first as a movie. Doctor Strangelove obviously came out later. So Failsafe, it opens up with Dan O'Harely. Dan O'Harely is an excellent actor from Halloween 3, and of course what's the... Geez, I'm getting so old. Last Starfighter. Great actor, and I have not seen him look this young. He still doesn't look necessarily young, and he opens up in kind of a feverish dream, a nightmare, kind of a bullfighting nightmare here. And he wakes up, and it's really kind of harsh looking, the film black and white and harsh, and he says goodbye to his family, kind of sets up who he is, and he has just this kind of worried feeling in his gut. He ends up going to work, and at the same time, there's generals everywhere. One of the generals ends up picking up a colonel and Fritz Weaver. So there's a fantastic cast in here. Henry Fonda plays the president. And there's kind of this big kind of get-together of all these generals and secretaries and, political scientists, one of which is Walter Matthau. And they set his character up, too, and you kind of get your idea who he is. All these characters are set up a little bit before we have this whole issue come out. And, of course, this is during the Cold War period, right, where we're, in a lot of Cold War with Russia. So it's very dangerous. Everybody's on high alert. Nuclear weapons, all that kind of stuff like that. And the movie basically has two kind of visitors kind of visiting I don't know if the Pentagon area, where exactly it is, but they have everything on scan. They're showing their systems of source, and it's a pretty impressive system, all these fail-safes and all this kind of stuff like that. And something pops up, they realize that something weird's on the radar, and then something goes completely wrong, where one of the planes is put on a certain alert, and it's pulled back, and they can't get through to them. And if this plane keeps going further with the plan and they can't contact them, there's going to be a nuclear war. They're going to drop a bomb on Moscow, and Moscow's going to retaliate. This triggers everyone to kind of go into panic mode and start talking and arguing with what they're going to do. And they had a meeting at one point. So Dan O'Harely definitely feels more like the person who wants to avoid war, who wants to avoid the killing. And Walter Matthau is in the complete opposite. He's like, we strike now and we take them out and we'll win. All this kind of stuff like that. And we have these arguments back and forth while all these other generals are put forth. We have people that are breaking under pressure. And we have these great moments where Larry Hagman is actually going to be the translator for the Russian while he's sitting with Henry Fonda, who plays the president. I can't think of a better person to play president. Sidney Lumet directed this, who directed 12 Angry Men, also starring Henry Fonda, so that works perfectly. But some of the stuff with the premiere, going back and forth with the president is just wonderful, and having it translated. Larry Hagman, of course, I covered one of his movies, and I was like, he's not an actor I'm super familiar with, but now I know he's from Dallas, and he's great in this movie. I'm not big much on the old TV and things of that nature, but fantastic cast in here, fantastically well acted. The dialogue is great, and it's a tremendously scary movie. I mean, we have a lot of these post-apocalyptic movies from '83 that aren't very good. They're not very scary, but the idea of nuclear war before it happens in films or during it happening is terrifying, and things right after it happens, like there's a couple from '83 that I'll be watching, like Testament, and the day after that I'll be checking out, and Threads, which comes out a year later, which is absolutely horrifying. But this movie here, made in like the 50s or late 50s, early 60s, is terrifying as well. And these arguments and the tragedy and the sacrifice that a lot of these people end up making. They set a lot of it up too, because they say if the bomb's dropped, you'll hear like a high-pitched noise, and you're going to hear that noise. And they set it up to hear that noise. And that dream, that nightmare in the beginning is going to come into fruition. But yeah, I feel like this is pretty realistic in terms of the arguing, in terms of the thought processes, in terms of human nature for the most part. I don't know if it is now, but I feel like it was pretty genuine back then. I think the acting is phenomenal. I love how it's shot. Dom DeLuise has a role in here, a very small role, but it's strange seeing Dom DeLuise in a serious role, and it works perfectly, right? Because, and like, I'm sure he wasn't Dom DeLuise at this time, but seeing these characters or these actors that are things that are a little bit more fun. I know that Walter Matthau is a very versatile actor. Charlie Varick, Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, Grumpy Old Men, all this kind of stuff like that. He's very versatile, but seeing some of these actors like Dom DeLuise or, even Dan O'Harely that for other things that may be more campy or more pulpy and this kind of serious situation works for me, because it's putting ordinary people in these situations that you don't always associate with being serious, and they're being dangerously serious, and it's scary as hell. I think the cast is amazing. I think the acting is amazing, and I think there's a lot of stuff that works really well in this. Now, I know that the book originally got sued by Red Alert. I love both these movies. I think that the idea of nuclear war in these movies is definitely interesting and scary, and we're stuck in it forever now, ever since when the bomb dropped. But yeah, a lot of good arguments and dialogue throughout the movie, and I am a sucker for dialogue, right? 12 Angry Men is just a bunch of people talking and arguing throughout the entire movie, and the way that they keep your attention is wonderful through the acting and and I'm sure there's a lot of great filmmaking techniques and editing and stuff in there you don't really realize is going on. But another fantastic movie by Sidney Lumet. I would highly recommend Failsafe. If you've seen Dr. Strangelove, I think this makes a great piece with it. And Joe Dante always talked about this movie, right? He said Dr. Strangelove, he didn't really know, people didn't know how to take that, right, when it came out. They're like, what the hell was that? Because Failsafe had just come out, and they both really just unpleasant. People, I guess, probably weren't ready for Dr. Strangelove, but they weren't ready for this either, I doubt. But anyways, great movie. Interesting movie, and a movie that I heard about in passing, but no one ever really told me exactly what it's going to be like. And it's probably pretty much what I guessed it would be, but much better than I thought it would be as well. All right, let's get to these questions, comments, and concerns. Nick from Flanders, God, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that takes me back decades. That was another millennium. They played it on repeat, and I'm pretty sure back in 96 on the nascent Belgium commercial channels. When I later learned about the TV show hitting the small screen, I at least wanted to give it a chance. I fell in love with that show immediately. Even the spin-off Angel turned out to be very solid. They don't make them like that anymore, I tell you. I'm so glad that this show becomes a cult classic. What? I'm also sad that quite a few of the cast have... Oh, this show became a cult classic. I'm also sad that quite a few of the cast have passed since. Michelle Trachtenberg, Buffy Kid's sister Dawn, Nicholas Brendan, best friend is Xander Harris, and very recently Anthony Shepard healed Buffy's mentor and surrogate dad Giles. Mr. Head was also an excellent singer. He was in Tim Burton's Sweeney Todd plus Darren Bowsman's Repo the Genetic Opera. Questions. I know you're younger than me, but at what moment did it hit you, hey, I'm no longer a young buck? I don't know. It hits harder every day, though, I'll tell you that. What was your dream car in high school? Preferably not a sentient homicidal one, I take it, unless you had a lot of enemies back then, sir. I am a very strange person. I can tell you what cars I like and what cars I don't like just by looking at them and seeing how they drive, but I don't give a fuck. I never cared about cars. I mean, I'm not anti-cars, but I'm not a car person. I was only ever obsessed with movies. Never had a car that I wanted. Why is it, do you think it is, that whenever a film school or film classes are subject to movie, it's usually of horror slasher variety? You took film classes, right? I assume those didn't end in a bloodbath unless you were the killer and never got caught, you evil genius you. I did take some film classes. There was passing of horror movies. No one really talked that in depth about them. I don't know. I think that film fans, big film fanatics, love horror films. And I think that horror fans are the most rabid fan base. Until next show, God willing, love the Christine episode. I'll be visiting that movie soon. Patrick Doherty, 4527, love Day of the Dead. So great that it's finally getting the stage where it truly appreciated. I agree. I really wish that they fixed that disc, though. Then we have No More Room in Hell podcast. Seeing The Furious in a packed theater was a super fun experience. Day of the Dead 4K looks marvelous. The brief audio issue controversy is unfortunate. Not sure if it is reason enough for me to want to shell out for another 4K unless there are other features not included in this Scream Factory edition. Also, that Jackie Chan set seems very worth the price. It is so far. Milk Vomit. Wow, I got Dave and he actually opened up his wallet and went to see The Furious. Awesome movie. I've seen it twice already. Definitely a future purchase. What about you, good sir? Good enough to warrant a purchase from you? It's good enough to warrant a purchase from me, but I probably won't. I like the movie. I just don't typically buy a lot of new movies. Now, if it was like on sale for $10 in 4K or something on a Black Friday, I'd probably grab it just for that. But it's not like a priority. Also, correction. Jackie Chan never starred in any Shaw Brothers films. That would be Golden Harvest, you big goof. But yes, Drunken Master's certified 5-star classic. Part 2, I mean. One of very Wong Fei Hung inspired films. I said he was in a bunch of Shaw Brother movies early in his career. If I said star, that was obviously a mistake, but he's in a bunch. He's got to start there. Ken Coakley, I am green with envy that you have the 4K copy of Day of the Dead. I saw that Scream Factory is putting out a deluxe 4K version of the film with a lot of extras as well as a new poster. One of the reasons why I love Romero's original trilogy is the fact that they all stand the test of time. Agreed. Day also has my favorite moment in all three films when McDermott, John, and Sarah get drunk in the camper and discuss why the whole thing was happening. I like John's theory that it was a curse from God showing the living what hell was really like. As far as the FX go, this was to Tom Savini's FX career what Sgt. Pepper's album was to the Beatles' music career. I also want to get Drunken Master 2. I saw the double bill with the original Drunken Master at the Museum Fine Arts Film Program in Boston in '94. The cast was star-studded if you follow Hong Kong cinema. Shaw Brothers regular T. Lung played Jackie Chan's father. Wei Kun-yi, the late Anta Moy, played Chan's mother. Andy Lau had a supporting role. Very tiny role, yeah. Supporting role, Hong So-puk, who played the thug that got shorts by Chan, also played Liu Kang in the Mortal Kombat video game. The tall thug who Chang fought in the climax was Lo Heng Kong. He was Chan's bodyguard in real life. I haven't seen Drunken Master 2 with the original audio soundtrack since the first time seeing it. Every time I looked it up on YouTube, but I ended up with the Legend of the Drunken Master with the English dubbed dialogue. Yeah, that sucks. Where we at? Way Up Dude gives me a thumbs up thing. Thank you. Tempo Tapas. Great review of Drunken Master 2. For more Chan greatness, you must see Police Story. I also recommend Armor of God. I definitely seen Police Story 3 and Armor of God 2. I definitely need to watch those. I have them. I just need to get some time to watch them. Let's do the very quick update here. First up, we have a 4K of Blood Rose from 1970 from Mondo Macabro. Solid, interesting 1970 flick. Upgraded to 4K from Mondo Macabro. And then we have a couple here. Another 4K. We have Corpse Bride, was on sale, dirt cheap, fun Tim Burton movie, $10 4K. I definitely will rewatch this one. I like this movie. It's not a masterpiece, but I think it's damn fun. And then last we have Golden Harvest Volume 2 is on sale, Shining Stars. I did not have this. I had the first one, the Horse Super Shocker set, but this one here has more stuff like action stuff, Beach of the War Gods, When Taekwondo Strikes, The Skyhawk, Shaolin Boxers, Slaughter in San Francisco, Legacy of Rage, The Master, and Hitman. There we go. Lots of cool stuff there on 4 discs here. Maybe they're both separate discs. I'm not 100% sure, but that is from Shout Factory. Yeah, let's get out of here. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.